Fighters wouldn't turn down $30 million. They just wouldn't do that.
Look, my approach to this game is completely different from everyone else's, and that became crystal clear when he officially put pen to paper. But behind the scenes, there's been talk of relationships falling apart, connections getting severed, and doors slamming shut. Something went seriously wrong when nobody was watching. Here's the real story behind Jon Jones potentially jumping ship to PFL while Dana White's biggest nightmare promotion keeps making aggressive moves.
Fighting just to continue fighting doesn't make sense to me anymore. I can earn money outside of punching people. To challenge myself in that way means more to me now than to fight again.
So Jon Jones steps away from UFC in June 2025, gives up that heavyweight belt, and leaves behind a record that reads like pure dominance. We're looking at 28 victories, just one loss, one no contest, and complete destruction across 2 different divisions. The guy they nicknamed Bones seemed like he was finally hanging it up for good, and everyone in MMA just took a deep breath. But if you know anything about Jon Jones, you know silence isn't his thing, and what came next blew everyone's minds.
Are you going to be fighting at the White House?
That is my goal.
That is your goal?
That is my goal. It's been my goal for a very long time, but...
Less than a month after saying he was done, Jones starts pulling classic Jones moves by keeping the entire sport guessing. The second President Trump mentioned this crazy UFC event happening at the White House, something lit a fire under Jones. He said the announcement really tickled his pickle, which is pretty wild language from someone who supposedly wanted nothing to do with cage fighting anymore. Come early July 2025, Jones jumps back into the UFC testing program, which every fighter has to do if they want to compete again. His retirement lasted roughly 3 weeks before he was already scheming his comeback, and honestly, that timeline is absolutely bonkers.
Francis Ngannou is a bad guy. He's not a good guy. He plays the whole, I don't understand the language, and he tries to come off
like he's, as the boss, he's a genius businessman and leader, and I really hope he gives me the opportunity, and I would be so honored. I can't wait for your return. Oh my gosh. Hey, I'll pray for it.
There's no barrier with this guy.
According to White, Francis violently over a bonus.
And he was pissed off that he didn't get a $50,000 bonus. Francis, you didn't get it because this, that. And he's in my office and he's arguing with me. The conversation's over. I'm starting to leave. And he grabs me by my shirt and like pushes me back in my office. And I said, dude.
Now, while Jones was playing this back and forth game with UFC, there was another organization watching every move he made. The Professional Fighters League, or PFL, as everyone calls it, built their whole brand around being everything Dana White's empire isn't. This venture capitalist named Don Davis launched it in 2018, basically rising from what used to be World Series of Fighting with one simple message that spoke to fighters feeling screwed over. Better money, more freedom, and actual control over their careers. Davis looked at what he called a massive, untapped global market of over 650 million MMA fans and decided he was going after every single one of them. The numbers behind PFL's growth are honestly pretty staggering. They bought out Bellator MMA in 2023, which gave them way more fighters and knocked out their biggest rival in one move. Saudi Arabia's SRJ Sports Investments grabbed a piece of the company that same year, and by 2025, PFL was worth around $1 billion, which is absolutely insane. They started regional divisions all over Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and Africa, with plans for Asia, Australia, and Latin America coming soon. Instead of UFC's promoter picks the fights approach, PFL runs seasonal tournaments with million-dollar prizes for champions, focusing on what they call pure merit-based advancement. This wasn't some small-time operation, hoping to survive. This was a calculated war against UFC's dominance, and nothing showed that better than their talent-stealing strategy, which critics call poaching and PFL calls providing opportunities. Don Davis has been brutally honest about this approach. He straight up said they pay more and that fighters control their own destiny in PFL, not getting controlled by someone else. Those are serious fighting words, literally, and Dana White has made it personal over every single comment. White has called PFL financially drowning and predicted their fighters would come running back to UFC eventually. The biggest prize in PFL's poaching campaign has to be Francis Ngannou. This monster left UFC in January 2023, gave up his title because he and Dana White couldn't agree on a single thing. Ngannou wanted better pay, healthcare coverage, all these basic requests. White later said nothing made him happier than sending that guy over to PFL, which tells you exactly how nasty their relationship became and how much bad blood exists between them.
And I even think we're going to have a UFC fight. Does anybody watch UFC, the great day in the world? We're going to have a UFC fight. We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this, on the grounds of the White House. We have a lot of land there. We're going to build we're not. Dana's going to do it. Dana's great, one of a kind. We're going to have a UFC fight, championship fight, full fight, like 20, 25,000 people. And we're going to do that as part of 250 also.
Guy, you know what I mean? And people don't. The language barrier probably, makes things even more complicated than they already are. Ngannou inked this massive deal with PFL in May 2023, which they called their biggest signing in company history, and they really went all out on this contract. The deal included actual ownership in the company, leadership positions like chairman of PFL Africa, and complete freedom to pursue boxing matches. He went and fought Tyson Fury in October 2023, losing a surprisingly close decision that shocked boxing experts and proved he could compete with elite boxers. Then came Anthony Joshua in March 2024, a knockout loss that still earned Ngannou roughly $30 million combined from both boxing fights, which is just ridiculous money. For MMA, he fought once under PFL, knocking out Renan Ferreira in round 1 during October 2024 to capture the Super Fights Heavyweight Championship. PFL had Hair Marquis Star, though people questioned the limited MMA action for such a huge investment. So, how does Jon Jones factor into this whole situation? Don Davis has been completely open about wanting the greatest fighter ever under his promotion, specifically to battle Ngannou. Back in March 2025, Davis publicly threw $50 million at Jones to face Ngannou, which is the type of money that gets even megastars' attention. He posted on social media about knowing exactly how Jon Jones makes $50 million, and that would be fighting Francis Ngannou to determine the real heavyweight champion and actual pound-for-pound king. Davis labeled it the fight of the decade for MMA enthusiasts. And honestly, he wasn't lying about that claim. By June 2025, PFL ramped up their offer with a winner-takes-everything proposal backed by Riyadh season money. If Ngannou wins, PFL and Francis split all the profit. If Jones wins, UFC and Jones split everything. It was a publicity stunt designed to make Dana White look like he was avoiding the biggest heavyweight fight in history. Davis even suggested that White and Jones were afraid to face Ngannou before his PFL debut, which just poured fuel on an already massive fire. The Jones vs. Ngannou drama started brewing back in 2020 when Jones gave up his light heavyweight title, specifically to move up and chase heavyweight gold. Both guys were UFC heavyweights at the same time, and fans were absolutely begging for this collision. Ngannou captured the UFC heavyweight title in March 2021 by devastating Stipe Miocic in brutal fashion. Jones was supposedly getting the next shot, except he wasn't because money became the roadblock. Jones reportedly demanded what he called Deontay Wilder money, somewhere between $10 and $30 million. UFC said no. Ngannou's coach Eric Nixick claimed Francis rejected $8 million because the pay would drop dramatically if he lost to Jones. Dana White blamed both fighters but later said Jones wasn't the problem. Ngannou disputed this, calling the UFC offer misleading as he approached free agency. Everyone pointed fingers at everyone else while fans watched their dream fight disappear. Meanwhile, Ngannou defended his title once against Ciryl Gane in January 2022. A unification fight he won despite battling a torn ACL and damaged MCL, which is absolutely incredible considering the agony he must have endured. Then he sat out over a year because of knee surgery and contract battles before leaving as champion. Jones made his heavyweight debut in March 2023 by submitting Gane for the vacant belt. Fans called it dodging prime Ngannou and said the so-called greatest fighter ever won a title vacated by a champion he never faced. Now here's where things get really interesting. In December 2025, Ngannou revealed on the Ariel Helwani show that his PFL contract expires very soon before June. He openly named Jones as his dream MMA opponent, with Deontay Wilder as his boxing target. When asked about fighting Jones at the White House, Ngannou said, "Absolutely, if that could happen, that could happen. There's definitely a chance. Anything can happen." He called it the biggest fight of all time, stating that the biggest fight of all time can only happen between Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. Jones has matched this energy completely. When Ngannou's coach mentioned Francis was still interested in a UFC return, Jones responded by saying, "Now we're talking. That's a real super fight. A clash of champions, not just hype. He prioritized Ngannou over Tom Aspinall and Alex Pereira for legacy reasons. Both men want this fight. PFL wants this fight. The fans want this fight. There's only one person standing in the way, and his name rhymes with banana white. Since Jon Jones walked away from UFC in June 2025, this guy has been the complete opposite of inactive, and honestly, he's been absolutely everywhere you look. The man who crushed two weight divisions for over 10 years has jumped into business deals, coaching up-and-coming fighters, and keeping an incredibly busy social media game that keeps him in every conversation, even without actually fighting anyone. If retirement means disappearing from public view, somebody definitely forgot to tell Jon Jones about that memo. Just a few days after announcing his retirement, Jones dropped news about a business move that shocked absolutely nobody who understands his brand-building instincts. He revealed co-ownership and the position of Chief Performance Officer at Ketone IQ, an energy drink brand focused on mental clarity and performance. Jones said it worked great in the cage, but he wants his real legacy to be how he handles business, adding that people need to try it because this stuff absolutely slaps. It's the classic fighter transition, turning health and fitness credibility into money while creating long-term income that doesn't require getting hit in the face, which honestly makes perfect sense. Earlier in 2025, Jones became co-owner of Dirty Boxing Championship Promotion, putting himself on the business side of combat sports. Post-retirement reports suggest he's been focusing on real estate through companies like Jones Street Investment Partners, holding onto cryptocurrency investments and exploring podcasting and coaching opportunities. The guy is building a complete empire beyond fighting, creating multiple income sources while his name still carries maximum impact. His coaching work has been especially noteworthy. Jones has taken special interest in Olympic wrestler Gable Steveson, making huge predictions about the young heavyweight's future after Stevenson's recent victory. He said Steveson will become the most elite heavyweight on the planet within 12 months, which is a massive endorsement from someone who knows heavyweight excellence inside and out. This type of mentorship accomplishes multiple things. It keeps Jones relevant in MMA discussions, positions him as an elder statesman of the sport, and potentially gives him credit for developing future champions he can claim he helped create. On social media, Jones has been absolutely relentless and strategic. His activity on Twitter and Instagram has earned praise from analysts like Chael Sonnen, who called it some of Jones's finest work for building mystery around his potential return. He's gotten into feuds with longtime rival Daniel Cormier over a charity grappling trilogy that would settle their decade-long beef once and for all. He's shared motivational posts, dropped cryptic hints about future plans, and commented on everything happening throughout MMA and boxing worlds, including Jake Paul's continued success in combat sports. He traveled to Chechnya during this period, adding to the international profile he's built over the years. Every single post keeps him in headlines without requiring him to actually fight anybody, but Jones wouldn't be Jones without controversy following him everywhere he goes. Just days before his retirement became official, a legal situation surfaced that reminded everyone about his troubled past outside the cage. The timing couldn't have been worse or more suspicious, depending on your perspective. On June 17, 2025, charges got filed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, stemming from a February 24, 2025 single-vehicle crash. Police responding to the scene discovered a heavily intoxicated woman partially undressed from the waist down in the passenger seat. She claimed Jones was driving, that they had consumed alcohol and mushrooms at his house earlier that night, and that he ran away on foot after the crash. A misdemeanor charge for leaving the scene of an accident was filed, with a duplicate phone harassment charge added briefly based on an alleged threatening phone call. Body camera footage released in June 2025 captured roughly 20 minutes of the incident, including phone calls where Jones allegedly made threats or references to violence. The footage spread across social media instantly, reigniting arguments about Jones's character that have followed him throughout his entire career. The timing sparked speculation that he was retiring to avoid scrutiny, rather than for any noble reasons about legacy or health. Jones tweeted that people shouldn't believe everything they read online. His lawyer called the situation targeting and unbelievable, claiming the woman made up her story to avoid her own DWI charges, and that Jones wasn't actually driving the vehicle. By September and October 2025, all charges got dismissed following investigation, but the damage to public perception was already done. This incident reminded everyone of his 2015 hit-and-run felony, where he fled the scene of a crash involving a pregnant woman, came back to grab cash and drugs from the vehicle, then fled again, That case resulted in probation and community service. The pattern of problems outside the octagon has defined Jones's career just as much as his cage dominance. Fans and media called the timing of the 2025 incident shady, with many believing his retirement was motivated by avoiding these legal problems, rather than any genuine desire to step away from competition. Since the charges were dismissed, no new incidents have been reported. Jones has kept his attention on the White House comeback campaign, his business ventures, and staying relevant in MMA conversations. He described his current mindset as being a man on a mission, patient but determined to finish his career on his terms at the biggest possible stage. The irony of Jones's situation is incredible when you step back and examine the complete picture. Here's a fighter universally considered the greatest of all time, with every physical advantage you could imagine, and a fighting intelligence that's almost supernatural, repeatedly damaging his own legacy through choices made outside the cage. Every time he gets close to pure greatness, something drags him back into controversy, and yet he keeps returning, keeps finding ways to stay relevant, generate headlines, and make people care about what happens next. His ability to remain the center of attention, even while retired, might be his most impressive talent. Meanwhile, PFL CEO Peter Murray confirmed plans for something very special for Ngannou's final fight in early 2026, possibly against new champion Vadim Nemkov, who called out Ngannou after winning the PFL title. Ngannou accepted Nemkov's challenge on social media, signaling he may fulfill his PFL obligation before exploring free agency. Whether that free agency leads back to UFC for the White House event depends entirely on whether Dana White's hatred for Ngannou can be overcome by the promise of the biggest payday in MMA history. As of December 15, 2025, Jones remains technically retired, but clearly not finished. He's in the testing pool, he's training, and he's campaigning for a spot on the biggest card in UFC history. PFL has made their offers and been rejected. Dana White remains skeptical of Jones and openly hostile toward Ngannou, but has left the door slightly open for the former while slamming it shut on the latter. Francis Ngannou is about to become a free agent with options. All the pieces for the biggest heavyweight fight in MMA history exist in the same timeline. Whether they actually come together depends on egos, money, grudges, and the willingness of powerful men to set aside their personal vendettas for the sake of giving fans what they've wanted for 5 years. The greatest fighter of all time isn't done making history. The only question is where that history gets made and who gets to profit from it. That's all for now, folks. And this is where we draw the curtains. For more of such content, be sure to click on the card showing on the screen. The UFC White House showdown and the bitter feuds that could destroy it all. In 2026 is circled on every MMA fan's calendar, and for damn good reason. UFC is planning to hold an event on the South Lawn of the White House, marking the first professional sporting event ever hosted on those grounds. This isn't some wild dream, it's actually happening. And the scope of this thing is absolutely mind-blowing. President Donald Trump first mentioned the idea in July 2025 during a rally, proposing a UFC card with 20,000 to 25,000 attendees, which would be massive. Dana White confirmed plans in August 2025 after White House meetings, calling it historic. Trump later specified the date as June 14th, which happens to be Flag Day and his 80th birthday, shifting from an initial July 4th target due to logistics and security concerns. The logistics are genuinely insane. A temporary arena holding 5,000 to 6,000 seats will be constructed in front of the White House, with giant screens on the ellipse for up to 100,000 additional viewers. Events are planned at the Lincoln Memorial Step. Fighter warm-ups may occur inside the actual White House, which is just wild to imagine. There will be fireworks, light shows, and fan activities across the entire National Mall as part of Acker's tour. Dana White has promised what he calls the most stacked card of all time, or the greatest lineup ever, with Trump suggesting 8 to 9 championship fights, which would be unprecedented since no UFC card has ever had more than 3 title bouts. The event will stream exclusively on Paramount Plus as part of UFC's new broadcast deal, with some preliminary fights potentially airing on CBS. No pay-per-view, no public ticket sales. Strictly invite-only with complimentary admission. This is designed to be a patriotic spectacle, and White has been saving big fights specifically for this card. Matchmaking discussions begin in February or March 20. Now the fight that everyone wants to see headline this historic event is Jones versus Ngannou, The timing seems almost too perfect. Ngannou's PFL contract expires before the event, making him a free agent right when this card needs its biggest attraction. Jones has been campaigning for a spot since July. Both fighters have publicly stated their interest in facing each other at this specific venue. Ngannou told TMZ that it would be the most exciting fight that UFC could put together. Jones described himself as getting in shape, lean and completely capable of jumping into a training camp, adding that life is good, and he's healing, getting stronger so he can finish his old man chapter like a real badass. Jones has been remarkably flexible about the term. In November 2025, he stated he's absolutely willing to do something he hasn't done in 15 years, which is fighting in a non-title or non-main event capacity, just to secure a spot on the card. He said he wants to face whoever is holding the belt at heavyweight. He's released political-style promo videos, framing it as his redemption and old man chapter finale. He described himself as the hunter rather than the hunted for once, expressing disappointment at being overlooked, but remaining patient and sharp. Joe Rogan has publicly pleaded for Jones to be included, calling his exclusion a travesty. Eric Trump has backed Jones publicly as well, but here's where the dream crashes into reality. Dana White does not want Francis Ngannou anywhere near his promotion ever again. When asked about Ngannou returning for the White House card, White's response was crystal clear. He said he doesn't know how he can make it any more obvious that there was nothing that made him happier than sending that guy to PFL, and that he doesn't want to be in business with guys he doesn't like, and that he doesn't think are good people. That's about as definitive a rejection as you can get in professional sports. To understand why White feels this way, you have to understand how both Jones and Ngannou's UFC careers ended. Neither exit was pretty, and both left wounds that haven't healed. Jon Jones's MMA career stands as arguably the greatest in the sport's history. He debuted in UFC in 2008, and became the youngest champion ever at age 23 by defeating Mauricio Shogun. He defended the light heavyweight title a record 8 consecutive times against legends like Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, Alexander Gustafsson twice, and Daniel Cormier. His fighting style combined elite wrestling, creative striking with oblique kicks and spinning elbows, and submission skills that made him nearly unbeatable. Then came the controversies: PED violations in 2016 and 2017, a hit-and-run felony in 2015, and domestic battery charges twice. He was stripped of the title 3 times due to disciplinary issues. Jones retired in June 2025 after prolonged drama surrounding a unification bout with interim champion Tom Aspinall. White had announced that Jones agreed to fight Aspinall, claiming they had a deal. Then Jones backed out. White stated that he had a deal to fight Tom Aspinall, and then Jones said he wasn't going to do it, leaving White unable to count on him for big events. Jones spent months publicly dismissing Aspinall, leading to accusations of avoiding a legitimate contender. White promoted Aspinall to undisputed champion after Jones vacated. Jones eventually apologized publicly for mishandling the situation and expressed a desire to meet with White in person to make amends. White accepted the apology, stating that Jones doesn't need to apologize to him for anything, and that even through all the bad stuff they've been through, he still says Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. But White also gave billion-to-1 odds on Jones appearing at the White House, citing the broken Aspinall deal as evidence of unreliability. Francis Ngannou's career took a different path. He holds a record of 18 wins and 3 losses, with 12 knockouts showcasing his devastating power. He debuted in UFC in 2015 with early wins, but suffered setbacks, including losses to Stipe Miocic and Derek Lewis. He rebounded with a 4-fight knockout tingert, culminating in knocking out Miocic. He defended once against Cyril Gane in January 2022, winning the unification bout while fighting with torn knee ligaments. Ngannou's exit was far messier than Jones. He left as reigning champion in January 2023, after contract negotiations collapsed spectacularly. White accused Ngannou of grabbing him and Chief Business Officer Hunter Campbell by their shirts during disputes. According to White, Ngannou put his hand on his chest and said they weren't done talking yet, to which White responded that they were absolutely done talking. White claims Ngannou turned down becoming the highest-paid heavyweight in UFC history, and was afraid of facing Jones, calling Ngannou not a good guy. Ngannou has been defensive but regretful about how things ended. In a 2025 interview, he said it was quite disappointing the way things went, and that they shouldn't have gone this way. He suggested cameras could verify what actually happened during those confrontations, and expressed frustration at constantly defending himself against White's claim. The relationship is completely broken, so the current status is this. White and Jones have a strained but improving relationship, with White reaffirming Jones as the greatest while remaining skeptical about his reliability. White and Ngannou have no relationship whatsoever, with White actively hostile toward any scenario involving Ngannou's return. The dream fight exists in a universe where Dana White doesn't exist, which unfortunately isn't the universe we're living in.